Hi everyone. This is a video lecture of Chapter 10, and I like to think I saved the best for last for the social psych class because this chapter focuses on relationships and attraction. And so I want you to consider how you have chosen your friends and your partner. And if you don't have a partner, maybe you've had one in the past. But think about at least your friends. How did you choose them? How did you decide you wanted to be friends with someone? And also consider whether we are more attached or less attached to our friends or our partner than we are to other family members. Because keep in mind that since we don't choose family members, um, for lack of a better word, we're stuck with them. But even then, we could decide to to leave a family unit and not look back. But um, do we hold our friends and our partner to a different standard than we do our family members? That is, do we accept more negative things from family members than we do from, say, a friend or a partner? And also, this whole idea of, blood is thicker than water. That's a cliche that is sometimes said. Blood is thicker than water, meaning that family is more important or family comes first um, over friends or a partner. Um, and so we'll think in this chapter about why relationships are important to humans, not just friendships, but family relationships, romantic or intimate partner relationships. Relationships for us as humans are very important. Without relationships with others, probably very few of us would be um, able to thrive in the ways that we do. So I want to make this note at the very beginning, and that is the fact that most of the research to date is heterocentric and it's heteronormative. So that means, of course, that it is focused on heterosexuals and what is uh, so, heterosexual relationships, and it is heteronormative because it's focused on what is the norm or what's normal or what's typical within heterosexual relationships. And we know that those are not the only types of relationships that are important to study. But most of the research to date is heterocentric and heteronormative. Um, Also, another thing to note is that when studying relationships, it's difficult for this reason. Unlike in other studies where we randomly assign people to groups and we tell them, hey, do this activity, and then we watch what they do, we can't do that with relationships. That is, we cannot randomly assign people to a relationship and then sit back and watch what happens. Things don't work that way, whether we're talking about an intimate partner relationship or a friendship. We just can't happen that way. Families are different, of course, because they're already ready made and we can study them as they were by fate put together. But other types of relationships are more difficult to study. And also, we have to consider that people in relationships have chosen to be in that relationship for the most part. And so, um, you know, we can't study in real depth how or why people formed long lasting or extended relationships. So there are just a few challenges in studying relationships, not just the heterocentric, heteronormative ones. So, for a lot of social psychologists, there is great evidence that the need to belong, the need to be part of a group, is something that is universal. We see this across all cultures, across all societies, whether those societies are still largely agrarian or industrializing or post-industrialized. The need to belong to some group of people or groups of people is something that all humans seem to be hardwired to need. And in your text, there's a discussion of Harlow's monkey studies, and there's a clip here that if you click on the link, it'll take you to the clip of Harlow's monkey studies. Essentially, what happened in the studies is that Harlow watched what happened to monkeys that were denied any kind of comfort from a mother. um, Monkeys were put in cages with um, nothing of comfort, just a wire mother in their cage. Other monkeys were given a wire mother, but that had some sort of softness about it. I think he put cloth on the fake monkey mother, and then he watched. He watched what happened as these young monkeys developed. And what he found was that not having the maternal comfort and love was very detrimental to the monkeys. And he, of course, extrapolated that this is the same thing that would happen to human babies. Of course, it would be unethical to do that with human babies, but he found that there were those profound negative consequences for those monkeys that didn't have the mother that was providing at least some comfort. There are different kinds of relationships, and two that are that we see frequently among humans are the interpersonal relationships and the communal relationships. The communal relationships I'll speak about first because these relationships are interesting to me because these are relationships in which people feel a special type of responsibility for one another in that group, and they give and receive according to what others in the group need. So it's not about how much someone contributes or doesn't contribute. It's more about what does someone need, and this idea that that person doesn't give enough isn't something that crosses people's minds. These relationships tend to be long term. Um, Also, interpersonal relationships. These are relationships that we commonly see among people who are in friendship groups or between a couple who are romantic partners. There are, of course, some common things in these relationships, these interpersonal relationships, but they tend to be well, the communal relationship is a type of interpersonal relationship. Sorry about that. The other kind are exchange relationships. And these, I think, unfortunately, that we see a lot more of than we see the communal relationships. Exchange relationships are more about um, looking at how much am I giving to this relationship, again, whether it's a friendship or a family relationship or a intimate partner relationship. The focus is more on what am I giving to this person, and what am I receiving back in return. um, and if it seems that there's not enough reciprocity, or it seems that one person's giving more, one person's taking more, these types of relationships tend to be more short term. And one question that I want you to consider is, we all know the U.S. divorce rate is quite high. Um, and I always wonder, could this be because marriage in the United States is viewed more from the point of view of an exchange relationship? That is I'm giving, I'm taking, how much am I getting back? Is this equal? Um, is that perhaps why? Because we tend to view marriage that way in the United States. Whereas in other countries, marriage is viewed more as a communal standpoint. That is, in a marriage in, say, India or um, uh, Africa, is it more that people are in that relationship and thinking about that relationship as being one of, I give according to what people in my group need, my family need, and not really spending so much time thinking about or caring about what you're getting out of it. So it's a question I have, and I encourage you to consider that as well. So now, thinking about theories that try to explain our relationships, because exchange relationships and communal relationships are two kinds of interpersonal relationships. So now we look at the theory here. Social exchange theory. You can see here that initially Kelly and Thiebaud did some research in 78, and then Rusbolt in 1983 did more research, replicated the results. Social exchange theory is the idea that how people feel about their relationship depends a lot on their assessments of what they're getting out of it. How much is it costing me to be in this relationship, and what am I getting out of it? It's essentially a type of it's an exchange relationship, and this theory is saying that's how or why exchange relationships happen. It's that people go into relationships, again, any relationship, friend relationship, intimate partner relationship, or even family relationships, that some people focus on what am I getting out of it? How much is it costing me to be a part of this relationship? And am I being rewarded enough? And if someone feels that they're not being rewarded enough being in a particular relationship, they're quite likely to leave. We also engage in comparison um, of who we are and what we think we can get out of a relationship or what we think we deserve out of a relationship. And of course, some people believe that they deserve a lot from relationships, that they're such wonderful people that and so highly desired because they are so wonderful, that they deserve to have a very fulfilling and satisfying relationship. And of course, these are people who are quite likely to see someone else outside of the relationship as that proverbial grass is greener on the other side. On the other hand, people who believe that they don't deserve much from a relationship, that perhaps they're unlovable or unattractive, um, or they are undesirable in some other way, they're poor or um, untalented, whatever it is they think that they lack, they're much more likely to stay in a relationship that is unhappy simply because they believe, well, this is as good as it's going to get. I don't really deserve all that much anyway. Um, equity theory. Equity theory is another theory, again, trying to explain relationships and why people are in different relationships. Um, equity theory is the idea that some people are really motivated to pursue fairness or equity in their relationships, and not just a partner relationship, an intimate partner relationship, but in their family relationships, in their friendships, in their work relationships. They really truly believe that when there is equity in relationships, that is when things are fair. And remember, fair doesn't mean the same, but when things are fair in their relationships, that is when um, the relationship is truly fulfilling. Okay? And it does, as I said, it doesn't mean the same. So, for say two friends, perhaps who are one it comes from a wealthy family, the other doesn't. Um, if those two friends often eat out, and the friend who has more money often pays, as long as both of them feel that they get other things from that friendship, they're probably going to continue to be friends, according to equity theory, because it's not about one friend always buying dinner. It's more about both of them are getting something from that relationship, whatever that thing is: friendship, companionship, emotional support. It could be a number of things. Here is a really important theory. It's called attachment theory. And Bowlby, back in 82, first did some research and suggested this theory. And then, of course, you see other researchers have also replicated the idea or the findings. And so it's a really well supported theory. Um, it's really pretty simple, and it goes really back to Harlow's idea, and that is that early attachments with one's parents and other caregivers, if there are others, shape a person such that that person's relationships will be influenced for that individual's entire life. And so, if you think about your own relationship with your parent or parents, you probably will reflect upon how close you are today to that parent or parents, and then try to think back to what kind of a relationship early in life did you have with that parent. Um, it doesn't mean things can't change, but many people, we tend to stay on the same track because it's difficult. It's difficult to overcome any lack of attachment at early ages. Um, so there's a clip here that shows you the basis of the theory, and so just click on that link and you'll see it. But here are the three types, the three primary types. And again, other researchers have added to these three primary types, but these are the basis of attachment theory that Bowlby first introduced. The secure attachment style. Secure attachment style is when an individual has had experienced at a very young age as an infant a loving, caring, nurturing parent or parents or caregivers. The child as an infant was held, was talked to, was sung to, was fed when it was hungry. The infant was changed when the dirty diaper existed. The infant, when scared, the infant was comforted um, and protected. The infant had a lot of really positive um, and nurturing interaction with caregivers from infancy forward. Subsequently, this is a person who finds it very, very easy, for the most part, to trust others, to get close to others, to share with others intimate details of their lives, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. They're comfortable depending on others and asking for help. They don't really worry much about people leaving them or someone getting too close or someone stabbing them in the back, etc. They don't really worry much about that. There are people who have the avoidant style. And the avoidant style is one in which a person received very few positive, nurturing, caring interactions with caregivers. And so this is an infant who wasn't held often, who wasn't talked to as often, who wasn't sung to, who as a toddler wasn't read to, who might have gone hungry, who might have had a dirty diaper longer than was comfortable, who might have been scared and wasn't comforted or protected. And so these children learn at very young ages that they really can't trust people because people aren't there for them. People don't protect them. People don't feed them. People don't comfort them. People don't provide affection and love. And so as adults, these are people who have a difficult time forming relationships with others. I'm talking about friendships as well as work relationships and, of course, intimate partner relationships. These are people who find it difficult to trust because they've never been able to trust someone. And so they tend to be very independent. They tend to not like to ask for help. They tend to not want anyone to get too close to them. And they sometimes may feel that a romantic partner wants more from them than they can give, than they're comfortable giving, because they just are too unwilling to trust. Then the third type is the anxious ambivalent. And the anxious ambivalent style is one in which a person had some degree of comfort, but there were times when the child was let down, when the child trusted but was let down, when the child had hope in what the parent said, but then was let down. On the other hand, there may have also been times when the child did rely on what the parent said, and it actually came true. So what this child learns is you can trust people sometimes, but not always. And so this person then becomes an adult who's anxious about who he or she can't trust. Um, who can I open up to? Who should I allow to be close to me? And so the anxious, ambivalent person is, on the one hand, reluctant to get close to others and finds that others are reluctant to get as close as they would like. Um, and they also, because of their experiences in the past with people not protecting and caring for them in the way that all children should have in their lives, they often will worry that they're not as lovable. There's not as deserving of being loved, and so maybe their partner doesn't really love them. That maybe their partner is just using them temporarily and won't stay with them. Um, and they may be so clingy because they so badly want um, to be in a good relationship, in a happy relationship, that might scare people away, which then, of course, feeds that anxious part of themselves whereby they are worried that somebody might leave them. So simply by trying too hard, they may actually push away the very person that they hope would care about them. Uh, and as I said, we all can probably see ourselves in one of these attachment styles because um, many social psychologists argue that we all have an attachment style based upon what we experienced as infants and children. And so there's a question here. Do we as individuals tend to have the same attachment style across all of our relationships, with parents and friends and siblings and romantic partners, work friends, etc.? And second, is the attachment style that you can identify for yourself, um, is that a given is that a given type of style within all of your relationships across time? And so good news here. Researchers say that it appears that people are capable of having different attachment styles with different relationship partners. So, for example, with friends, you may have a secure attachment style, but maybe with a romantic partner, you're anxious or ambivalent, or maybe avoidant. Um, Similarly, you may have a very strong, secure attachment style with family, but when it comes to friends or intimate partners, then maybe you have more of an avoidant or an anxious avoidant type of style. And so, again, the research tends to support the idea that it's possible to have different attachment styles depending upon the kind of relationship we have and the people in that relationship with us. Um, so, that's a good thing. So it means that just because we might be anxious, avoidant, or avoidant with somebody in a particular friendship, that other friendships maybe we have very secure attachment styles with, or intimate partner relationships. Um, it also seems possible, according to researchers, that we might start out with, say, an avoidant or anxiety dimension to our relationship, but over time, as we get to know an individual better, that we might be able to have a secure attachment in that friendship or in that intimate partner relationship that we didn't have at the beginning. So there's hope there. If you're one of those people who is like me, I do not have a secure attachment style, and so I readily recognize that I am an avoidant style of attachment. And I know why it is. It's the kind of family I grew up in. And it is difficult for me to trust people. It is difficult for me to ask people for help. I would prefer to be the one who is being asked to help as opposed to um, asking for help. And so the good news for me is that over time, I've been able to, in some ways, trust certain friends, although it is difficult for me to trust friends initially, new people. All right, so let's move to attraction. Thinking about, what's the basis for good chemistry or bad chemistry, or as the saying, the popular culture now typically, we were vibing. What is vibing? What's the basis for vibing? And so I typically would ask students to identify what some more ideal characteristics are that a partner will, or maybe if you have a partner now, currently does have. And what are the deal breakers? Because we all have them. What are the things that you just wouldn't put up with? For me, I would never date anybody who is a smoker. Um, I'm not a dater anymore. I am married, but when I was, I also wouldn't date anybody who smoked. I can't stand the smell of cigarette smoke. Um, so those things were deal breakers for me, and I'm sure you have some too. Thinking about who we vibe with, who we become friends with, who we become intimate partners with. There is something about proximity. There's something about how close are we to other people. And so there is a research discussed in your text about how close are we to people is not the only thing. It's also about what is called functional distance, meaning that not only do we say live in the same apartment building, but do you live near a stairwell or near an elevator where you're much more likely to see people? Because if you do, you're much more likely to make friends with people um, on your floor versus somebody who lives in the middle part of the building. Because you're not close to the ingress and egress of the building, you're less likely to see people coming and going. Um, and the same thing, we see this in terms of friendships. Um, when we think about who we're friends with, why'd you become friends? Are your friends people who lived in your residence hall, your first year at the University of Laverne, or um, are you friends with people who grew up in your same neighborhood, or went to the same high school you did, or friends with people who go to the same church or temple or synagogue that you do, or people who belong to the same soccer club that you do, or people who belong to the same Facebook page that you do, etc. So thinking about the proximity. There's also this really interesting idea called the mirror exposure effect. And this is really just a simple idea. And if you think about it, you'll probably think to yourself, oh, yeah, I've experienced that. It's really just the idea that the more often we are exposed to a particular stimulus, whether that's a particular food or language or drink or exercise, whatever it is, that the more we're exposed to that thing, that stimulus, the more likely we are to begin to like it and to like it more and more and more. Um, in fact, you could even think about, just alcohol, drinking alcohol. If you drink alcoholic beverages, you probably recognize that initially, when you began to drink, you didn't like alcohol. Alcohol has a very unattractive taste, unpleasant taste, I should say, initially. But for those of us who do use alcoholic beverages or drink alcoholic beverages, um, we know that it was over time that we kept trying it, and then eventually, oh, okay, well, I like beer, or I like wine, or I like this whiskey or that vodka, or whatever it might be. And so for friendships, it may very well be, as well as for romantic relationships, that part of it is just being around someone often, whether it's in school or at work or in your neighborhood or at the same gym, whatever it is, that we may begin to like someone. In fact, you probably know someone who is in a relationship with another person that initially you would not have predicted that they would ever be attracted to that person. It's just not that individual's quote type. And yet there they are in that relationship. Why? Maybe they work together. Maybe they go to the same gym together. Maybe they go to the same temple or synagogue or mosque together. Maybe they're on the same soccer club together. Whatever it is. there's probably was an instance where there was this repeated exposure, and before any of the either of them realized it, there was some degree of attraction. All right. Let's Also, thinking about similarity in relationships, whether it's friendships or intimate partner relationships. Um, you know, we often think, oh, well, opposites attract, and that's again another very common cliche: opposites attract. But the reality is that studies of romantic couples have found that typically people in a romantic relationship are more alike than they are um, different. And it's also interesting that in interracial and interethnic relationships, people are more similar in personality traits than people who are of the same race or ethnicity. So it seems as though similarity in whatever way, political beliefs, religious beliefs, um, values, morals, etc., that those things seem to be quite important within romantic couples. All right. So, and then we have to be honest about the influence of physical attractiveness because physical attractiveness really does play a role in interpersonal attraction. Unless you're somebody who is blind, um, then obviously that's not the case. But for those of us who are sighted, who have eyesight, we see a person's attractiveness or perhaps lack thereof even before our brains realize it. And I'm sure you all know somebody, maybe some of you are those individuals who say, oh, well, no, not me. I don't judge people by how they look. I look for the character of the person, etc. Yes, that sounds great. Sounds nice. But I think that is BS. Here's why. If you've ever been to a buffet or a potluck, and there's a bunch of different types of dishes there. As you go through and you start putting things on your plate, I'm sure that this has happened to all of us. Maybe there's something on the table or in the buffet lineup that doesn't look familiar. And so you look at it a little closer, you try to look around, see if nobody's looking. Then you likely will, pick up a forkful or a spoonful and try to see if you can determine what's in it, maybe even sniff it. But if you can't determine what it is, particularly if it looks, quote, ugly, then you're probably not going to eat it. Why? Because you're a human and you respond to things that are attractive positively and you respond to things that are unattractive negatively. It's who we are. We're humans, no doubt about it. Um, there is some research that argues that across time, um, physical attractiveness and body types, of course, have differed. Now, as you can see here in this clip from the text, in the Middle Ages, um, a fuller bodied woman was considered to be quite attractive. By the time we're in the 1950s, Marilyn Monroe is the has is a slimmer model of attractiveness, but even she is said to have been a size 12. Of course, size 12 today is probably really like size 8, since all sizes have gotten bigger. And then you look at I would say probably from the 1970s on, models or attractiveness has been deemed to be someone who is very thin. But you look at facial features, and what we do tend to see is that across time, facial features, in terms of what is considered to be attractive, has remained fairly static, meaning unchanged. You see Queen Nefertiti on the left and Angelina Jolie on the right. And what you notice is that the large almond shaped eyes, the straight, slim nose, or what was typically called an aquiline nose, the fuller lips, the high cheekbones. That is considered, the square jaw, that's considered to be quite attractive. And remember that we're talking here about ancient Egypt and here to the 21st century. That commonality in terms of what is considered to be attractive is important. Similarly, the symmetry of facial features tends to be important. For if someone has, and we all have asymmetry in our faces, that's just a fact. But if it's usually just millimeters and we can't really tell that difference. But if it's very noticeable, people are typically turned off by that. And so there's a link here to a picture of a man who's had three different face transplants, or sorry, two different face transplants. He suffered from a congenital condition that made his his facial bones grow askew. And if you click on that link, you'll see his pictures. Um, and again, most people would look at this gentleman and be very turned off by how he looks simply because of the very noticeable asymmetry of his face. All right, so let's see. There's some interesting information in the text about gender differences, so I'll trust that you'll take a look at that. I'm going to focus on um, romantic relationships and types of love. And eh, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't really have a standard definition of love. The dictionary certainly does, but when I ask students, what does love mean to you? Or how do you know you're in love? How do you know when you're in love? Or how do you know when you love someone? Students often struggle with this question, like, what is love? Or how do you know when you're in love? Because it's not an easy one to answer. We can love people in different ways. Obviously, we may love our friends one way, our family members another way, and our intimate partner in yet another way. And so love is very complex because we as humans are, of course, are complex. But three primary types of love that have been identified by researchers are companionate love, and this is the type of love that is very typical between family members and friends. Those kinds of relationships that we have with friends and family members are typically companionate love. That is, we genuinely care about these people. We generally trust them. We share our activities and interests with them and values, and we generally like to be around them. We like spending time with them. Compassionate love is more likely to be found in a communal relationship. And remember that collectivistic communities or societies, like many Asian societies, tend to have the communal relationship where the benefit of the group is more important than the benefit of the individual. And so compassionate love is much more focused on responding to the needs of people within the group and making certain that people within the group have what they need. And for mothers, compassionate love, and fathers too, for people who have children, um, they tend to have compassionate love for that child. It's not a guarantee though. Romantic love. Romantic love is the third type of love that has been identified by researchers. And this is the kind of love that we think of depicted in the movies, depicted in TV shows, where we say we're in love with somebody, or that we're head over heels in love with someone, or that we are falling in love with someone. And I don't know about you, but falling and being head over heels implies falling too. That sounds hurtful to me. So we almost describe love as being something that we don't have any control over, something even that could potentially hurt us. Because if we're falling in love, we can fall too far and get hurt. Um, so yeah, those are questions that I would typically ask in class. And there are three. This is the investment model of commitment. There are three um, criteria or three components that seem to make people more committed to their partners. And one, of course, is satisfaction. How satisfied are people in a relationship? If one or both of them are feeling pretty satisfied, they feel as though the rewards they get from being in the relationship is equal to the costs, or even that they get more rewards than it costs them to be in a relationship, they're probably going to rate themselves as fairly satisfied with the relationship. Two is whether there are other alternative partners in their galaxy, in their realm. Are there others around who seem like they could become suitable partners as an alternative to the person they're currently in a relationship with? If the answer to that is yes, there are other alternative options, then they may not rate themselves as quite as satisfied, and may be more likely to be thinking about leaving the relationship. And how invested are people in that relationship? That is, how much time have they put into this relationship? How much trust and loyalty and care and nurturing and love have they put into the relationship? If they've invested fairly heavily in that relationship, they may be much more likely to think of it as a good relationship and to be happy with it. And even if they're not happy at a particular period of time in a relationship, they may be much more willing to try to work things out. They may be much more willing to go to therapy, couples therapy, to work on issues that they have, whether it's anger management or some other issue that is making the partner unhappy, because they believe that by working on themselves, it can help to make the relationship better. So those are three important factors that go into relationships. Also, I want to finish up with this research by Dr. John Gottman. Dr. Gottman is a social psychologist who's been studying relationships and couples for well over 20 years. And he has identified what the, the four most harmful behaviors based on his research. In fact, he calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. There's a YouTube clip there that if you click on it, it'll give you a cute little cartoon of these different types of harmful behaviors. But the four are criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. And what Gottman has found, and he claims that he can, with over 90% accuracy, he claims that if he works with a couple and sees one or more of these four factors present in the relationship, that if people are not willing to work on overcoming these one or more of these harmful behaviors, he says that he can predict with a 93% accuracy the breakup of the relationship. So I encourage you, watch the clip, and then think about, do you use any of these harmful types of interaction with in your relationships, whether they're family or friends or an intimate partner relationship. So that's it for chapter 10.